Well, hello. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here on this Sunday evening, 6 o'clock Eastern Time, 5 o'clock Central. This is our second Sunday doing these, and I think that they're really exciting, very helpful as we all, as candidates, trying to connect with you all, as well as you all, the voters, the volunteers, the donors, try and connect with us, the candidates. And so I just want to say thank you, everyone, for being here. And if you can, just take a moment to share this stream on your social media platform. So take a minute, help us get the word out as we're talking about this, because everything that we're doing, we need your help getting the word out, which is what we're all here to talk about today. So I want to just go ahead and dive right into just some stories and things I want to share from the campaign trail. And because there's lots of really exciting things happening right now. And so I'm really excited to share that the Communications Workers of America have announced that they're endorsing my campaign. And so that's the second labor union that has announced their endorsement. The first was the Tennessee AFL-CIO. And I'm sure everybody is aware about the Republican Party trying to put right to work and amend our Constitution to have it say right to work. And we need to vote against this. We need to vote no on one, because right to work is really a right to earn less. And we'll continue talking about that. But I want to, share that excitement because I'm really proud and honored that they have entrusted me with that. And so I want to carry that banner forward and continue doing the work, because November 8th is coming and we all must vote no. The other thing that I want to share is that, I've got some stories from the campaign trail. And this past Saturday, I was canvassing out in Carter County. And I was actually in the Watauga area of Carter County and just had such a great experience talking with voters there. And everyone that I came across was just talking about how they're just so ready for change, that 32 years is such a long time to be in office. And they're facing a lot of the same struggles that they've been, or things have gotten worse, that they're worried about where things are going. So I just wanted to share that. And, they're worried about the division that they're experiencing in our communities. They're worried about our taxes going up as we're watching school funding and the way that it's going to be stripped off to go to private schools, and therefore elevating property taxes. So taxes going up despite people having had promised no new taxes. This is what they've done. And finally, affordable health care. I spoke with a gentleman who is a type 1 diabetic, and he talks about the massive amounts of expense that he has as a type 1 diabetic, just trying to get his medication, as well as in this medical monopoly. And he feels like he's spinning his wheels. So we all deserve access to better, affordable, accessible care. So this is why I'm in the race. This is why I'm running in November, because we need an upgrade. We need a better representation in Nashville. And so I just want to remind everybody, 1990 was a long time ago. Think about what Windows operating system we were using in 1990. I mean, 3.0, 3.1, The Simpsons had just aired. The Hubble telescope was just launched. The world has changed since 1990. I mean, this was not a thing in 1990, but this is the world we're living in today. This is the job market, the housing market. Everything that we're facing is a whole other world than 1990. So I think we need a politician who understands what that world looks like. And so I'm here to ask for your vote. So we're just going to dive right in, because talking about voter turnout is just such a huge issue that I want to make sure that we reserve most of the time to talk about that. And I want to bring on some special guests that have here tonight. So I'm going to bring them on here now, if I can get my mouse to work. Let's see, the joys of a dual screen. There we go. So I'm going to add Dr. Martin and Emily Cupples, and we'll add Ben Jones when he's able to make it. But welcome, Emily. Welcome, Dr. Martin. And I'll go ahead and actually let you all introduce yourselves. Dr. Martin, if you want to go first.
Yeah. Hey, Kate. Thank you so much for having us on tonight. I really appreciate the chance to be here. 1990, I was not able to drive a car yet. So it's been a minute. Jason Martin here. I'm a pulmonary critical care doctor and a Democratic candidate for governor here in the state of Tennessee. And I'm running for a lot of the same reasons that you are, Kate. because people are hungry for common sense and compassion in government, and that means equality. That means having access to great public schools, access to affordable health care, and access to opportunity. So that's why I'm in the race too.
Yeah. Thank you for stepping up and wanting to serve our state. Emily, share a little bit about why you decided to work on Dr. Martin's campaign.
Yeah, good evening. Emily Cupples here. I'm the senior campaign advisor for Dr. Jason Martin. As you all know, he recently won the official Democratic nominee for governor. So continuing now into the general. After I met Dr. Martin and listened to he and his wife, the real Dr. Martin, Jennifer's vision for the state of Tennessee and the issues they wanted to tackle, I truly believe this was the candidate that we needed for this moment in time. You brought up 1990. I wasn't even born then, but unfortunately, a lot of our policies are still as regressive as they were 30 years ago. And so excited for their leadership for the state of Tennessee and excited to work with candidates like yourself down the ballot to bring a blue wave this cycle.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both for being here. And I just want to take up one moment to say thank you to Councilman Smiley and thank you to Dr. Atwater for running and also wanting to serve our state. So really appreciate anybody who steps up, wants to serve. It's a big deal when you do that. It's a lot of time, effort, and energy. And so thank you for doing that. So let's go ahead and dive right in talking about voter turnout. And I know that there was a big expectation looking at August coming into that, and just in terms of just sheer numbers of what we thought was going to happen. And I know here in District 3, we hovered right around 13%, which was not what anybody thought was going to happen. What do you all think are the biggest causes of that?
Well, I mean, I think, there are a number of things at play. I mean, systemically, Tennessee is low when it comes to registering eligible voters. We're in the bottom 40s in the country. And then when it comes to turning out eligible voters, we're also in the bottom 40s. I think there's a number of reasons for that. We have some pretty strict voter registration laws in the state of Tennessee. And for example, and voting laws. For example, if you miss, 2 cycles and then you get purged from the rolls, and then you have to go, get re-registered, that can be a burden for folks. I think that sometimes the number of voting centers and the locations of voting centers can be a barrier for folks. And there are things that we could talk about to get over those barriers, like convenience voting centers, so that you can, just like with early voting, you could go to any polling place in your area to vote. I think that would be something we could do that would be helpful. Also, 8.5% of our electorate, roughly more than 400,000 Tennesseans, are excluded from the voting process because of a prior felony conviction. And so I think that there's things we can do to get nonviolent offenders off those rolls and back into the voting booth. But mainly, I think that people perhaps feel like their votes don't matter. And I want to push back against that, because every single vote matters. And I think as candidates, Kate, and I'm sure you would agree, it's incumbent upon us to go out there and explain to folks that the issues we're fighting for are their kitchen table issues, like healthcare, education, a great job, internet access, infrastructure. All that stuff matters on a daily basis. So we have to go out and tell those stories.
Absolutely. So I'm running in a red area. I mean, Tennessee has a lot of red areas in it, but like what is traditionally called a red area. And I've been organizing up here for years, and I've seen pushing towards blue, especially Johnson City becomes like a blue dot here. And there's a lot of areas up here trending blue. All of the counties in District 3 made a move towards a bluer move in 2020. So there is movement happening. And I think that one thing I hear is that it feels like we get fed this narrative. It's a red state. And I think you said this, Dr. Martin, or you just now said this, that, what my vote doesn't matter. Right. I'm up against what seems like an insurmountable hill. How can I change it when it doesn't seem to matter? And I hear a lot from Democrats locally, and they'll come up and either whisper to me, "I'm a Democrat too," and they'll kind of do that. They'll either do that at the fair, they'll do that just a side event. I'll be wearing a campaign shirt, and they'll see me at Kroger, and they'll mention this. And so this was and I want to tell people I could fill an auditorium with the number of people and still have people waiting to get inside with the number of people that feel like their votes don't matter. I know when I was organizing in Washington County, there were 5,000 Democrat-leaning voters who don't traditionally turn out to vote. that's just Washington County alone. And
Right.
so, you know, as we're thinking about that, I think that kind of leads us into voter engagement. And so ways that our campaign, and obviously, you know, we have campaign strategy and things, but in general, we all talk about canvassing and phone banking and postcards and all of that. But can we kind of talk about the importance of talking to voters, like how your campaign is harnessing that?
Yeah.
Oh, and I see Ben Jones, the deputy campaign manager for the campaign, has joined. So I'm going to add Ben to the live stream too. Welcome, Ben. Thank you for being here. Real quick, I'll jump right back into the question I just asked. Ben, if you'd like to share a little bit about why you decided to work on Dr. Martin's campaign.
Absolutely. I met Jason back in August of last year, and I really liked his dedication and his background. Not being from politics in the past, I felt like we needed to do strategy here in Tennessee. So that was the reason I got involved with him. And it's been a really great time going to all 95 counties in the state. And we were really excited about winning this primary so that we can turn our full focus on beating Bill Lee. So I'm happy to be involved and happy to be here. And thanks for having us, Kate.
Oh yeah, thanks, Ben. Thanks everyone for being here. So I'm going to shift it back to the question, and that if we've talked about kind of the voter engagement and the importance of talking to voters, so you know, and just talking about why that matters. So I'll go ahead and hand it off to anybody that wants to answer it.
Yeah, I'll start, and then you guys please chime in as well. You know, in our campaign, we felt like it was very important to go to all 95 counties, not just for photo ops, you know, for something for social media at the local diner, but first to listen. You know, especially, you know, having not come from the political world, we thought it was important to go listen to what the pain points are, what the pinch points are in individual communities. And I can't tell you whether the county was red or blue. I can't tell you how many times we'd go to a place and, you know, dozens and dozens of people would show up who maybe aren't politically aligned, you know, typically, but we're excited that someone running for a statewide office was shining a light on issues in their community. And so I think the number one way that you grow engagement is by listening to what people have to say, and being respectful when they disagree. And then, you know, using information from that tour, we were able to put together a platform that really sort of transcends party. We talk about this on our campaign meetings all the time. I really feel like the team sport mentality to politics is tearing us apart. The team sport mentality, you know, to, you know, national politics is tearing us apart. And so what we've tried to do is create an agenda based on what we heard that applies to everyone. And that's access to a great public education, keeping it public, supporting our public school teachers, having the courage to stand up when someone calls them dumb and say, that's wrong. You know, we're focused on expanding Medicaid so that we can get healthcare to communities that need access to healthcare, because that is not only the right thing to do for, you know, in your heart to take care of your neighbor, but also just for your pocketbook to help grow economies, because who wants to go set up a new plant or a factory in an area without access to healthcare? So the issues we run on sort of apply across the state. That's our strategy. You guys want to add anything?
Oh, yes. Here we go. Okay, I got it unmuted. I feel like I'm in 2020 again, where I'm like, you're on mute. Kate, I think you said it at the beginning. You know, you mentioned you were an organizer, and then you said organize at least 3 or 4 more times in the next few moments following that. That is the key to any candidate, specifically Democrats, Dr. Martin's race, your race. That's going to be our key to winning this cycle is organize, organize, organize. And how are we organizing voters? And that means meeting them where they're at, whether that's through a 95 county tour, whether that's through a phone bank, whether that's through a postcard. We've got to meet voters where they're at and not expect voters to come to us, which unfortunately some campaigns thinks that is a strategy to do, but we know voters aren't going to actively seek out campaigns. And so we've got to actively seek out our voters and get them re-engaged and get them re-energized. You were just quoting stats as you've seen a trend in Johnson City. I'm sure that is due, if we were to look at it in correlation to the work that you have done organizing and the Washington County Democratic Party has done the past 4 years to organize voters. And so that's going to be the key to this election cycle, is just organizing voters. Now, I do think we can take a more modern approach as we look at our different electorate. Ben will speak to that because that is his wheelhouse. But, you know, Some we're going to connect with on Facebook and Twitter through great messaging. Others we may connect with through a text bank or a phone bank. And others, some of our more traditional, perhaps older voters, we're going to connect with in-person events, postcards, and mail. But I think we've got to have a blend of strategies of how we're organizing and connecting with voters. It's not a one-size-fits-all.
Absolutely. Ben, did you want to jump in, add anything?
Yeah, I'll just echo a lot of what Emily and Jason said. You're right. Like the older voters, the great thing that we have as Democrats is we have access to Vote Builder. So we've got voter history, we've got contact information, all of that good stuff. And we can hit people with text banking for super cheap that are younger voters. We can hit people that are older with mail pieces and that sort of thing. We can also take that data and put it into our social media so that we can create lookalike audiences and things of that nature. So it's like they said, it's a not one or the other. It's a all of the above approach. So.
Absolutely. One of the things that just kind of want to add in, I should say add a couple of things, not just one thing, but in that, so there's a quality of touch, if you will, and it's really talking about relationships in that sense of, and don't get me wrong, my campaign is sending text messages. We're on social media right now. But if I come knock at your door, I'm more likely we're going to connect. There's a one-on-one connection there. And so, but that's really intimidating for a volunteer. And then that's really intimidating for a volunteer in what they believe is a red area and what they believe might be a red dangerous area. That's a thing that is a very real conversation. And yet I've been canvassing in rural areas in this district, and I've had wonderful reception. And so I think that, what are some of words of wisdom you would share to help volunteers kind of get past that, and feel that it's safe and that it's okay, because voters really do want you to come knock on their door. You're going to get the response of nobody's ever knocked on my door. Nobody's ever asked for my vote. And so what are to get them there, what would you share?
I'll hop in here first and then pass it to Dr. Martin or Ben. I think when it comes to volunteering or just encouraging volunteers, one, they are volunteering for you because they have seen something in your candidacy or in your campaign that they have identified with and has energized them to take the next step. So one, I think it's just really important that a volunteer actually get to meet. If they're putting their time, energy into volunteering for a candidate, it's really important that they hear directly from the candidate and just feel really encouraged that way. It doesn't really help with nerves, but it does help with excitement. So we always make sure to send Dr. Martin in to talk and thank volunteers. I think a second piece of it is just great volunteer training and working alongside your volunteers. So never send out a new volunteer alone. Never send out a new volunteer to a part of town or a community that you think they may not be well received because you do know it's super red. Maybe send them to a more Democratic friendly district in the beginning. The third thing is we always will role play with our volunteers of what's the best this interaction could happen and what's the worst this interaction could happen. And some of that is actual fun role play to help eliminate nerves. The other piece of that, though, is it just prepares them for the worst case scenario. And after they're able to reason with that in their head, they feel a little bit more comfortable with it. And then the other thing I would say is maybe don't start directly. If a person is volunteering for the first time, don't send them directly to a door. Maybe it's a funnel of engagement. And so they come in first and they may start writing a postcard. Then they move up to working a text bank. Then they move up to doing a phone bank. And then it's like, okay, you've done everything but knocked on a door and had a face-to-face conversation. Maybe we've dipped our toe in the water and we're ready for that.
Yeah. Let me just add in, these are things that all of our campaigns are doing. And so if you volunteer for mine, Dr. Martin's are all of ours in that sense of going that when nobody's going to throw you into the hardest district or any of that, you're going to go canvass with somebody and go where you're comfortable. We're going to come meet you where you are. If you're interested in tabling and that's where your comfort zone is, please sign up to volunteer. If your comfort zone is postcards, please sign up to volunteer. So I'm wanting us to talk about it and continue talking about this because I think a lot of people are intimidated about the volunteer process and what does it look like to volunteer in these areas. And so I'm going to kick it back to to Dr. Martin's campaign on this, but I wanted share that for volunteers that are watching this, that this is what, both of these campaigns, we have trainings, we'll walk you through it. And I promise we won't do anything that is past your comfort zone. We'll hold your hand. We got you. So, but yeah, Dr. Martin or Ben?
Okay, I do want to say just real quick, speaking to volunteers out there, volunteers are so important, especially on races, because we know the war chest of monies that we're up against, and we may not be able to out fundraise Republicans or the GOP ever. There's just no reality where Democrats are ever going to do that on national, state, or local level. But we can outwork them, and we can out organize them, and volunteers are crucial to the campaign. And I just want to thank any volunteers that are listening for that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And money can't buy community.
That's right. Yeah, I just wanted to say about, kind of the whole experience of talking to people who maybe don't see the world like you. I've been surprised, actually, how much, and this is like probably my biggest lesson of the whole campaign, how much we all have in common, despite, the flag that we may carry, the red flag or a blue flag. I think that we have so much more in common. And when you meet people kind of respectfully and in an inquisitive way, people are always, almost always willing to have a conversation with you. And I'm thinking of a conversation that I had in Mount Juliet, a community east of Nashville, over in Wilson County a couple of weeks ago, with a gentleman who identified himself as a staunch Republican. And we talked about some of the, more divisive issues. And we had a great back and forth over the course of like 30 minutes, a few minutes here, a few minutes there. And at the end of it, he was like, man, thank you so much for listening to me. I'm going to go out and vote for you, in this primary, because I want to see what you have to say going forward. And I thought that was really cool. And I think that if we just keep an open mind when we talk to folks, stay principled on our answers, but also data driven, that people will respond to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Ben?
Yeah, I'll just say that there was a study done a few years back by some professors that showed that the most effective thing that you can do to change a voter's mind is knock a door, followed closely behind by a personal phone call. And everything else that's done is much lower effectiveness than those two things. So, and I'll say this too. I've done thousands of phone calls. I've knocked thousands of doors. People are a lot nicer to you when you knock on their door, because, it's a lot harder to be rude when someone's at your door. And I knocked a door back in 2019, I believe, is when Doug Jones was up for re-election, and I was working on Justin Canute's race. And I knocked on 3 different people's doors who didn't know the election was happening that day, and all said, "Oh, wow, Doug Jones does need our vote. Let's go out and do that." And as y'all know, he won that by a very tiny margin. And as Democrats running in the South, we definitely have to emulate his type of race, have to emulate Bashir's type of race in Kentucky, John Bel Edwards in Louisiana. And there is a margin for this. And just having that in-person conversation is so effective, and it's so rewarding when you can feel in your heart that you've moved somebody to the polls. So definitely encourage you to do that. And if you're ever worried about it, all of us are happy to go with you. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And we lose every race we don't try at. We lose every door we don't knock. We lose every phone call we don't make. And so we have to go have these conversations. And I say this when I go speak at a lot of events, is that we've been told that talking about politics is impolite conversation. And then we will talk about the struggle of sending a kid to college. We'll talk about the GoFundMe that was set up for our neighbor that can't afford their healthcare bill. We'll talk about somebody that can't find a wage or that can afford their housing, that they can't find a job locally. That's all politics. We talk politics all the time. Politics isn't the divisiveness of 2 different parties headbutting. Politics is the policies that are set for us. Politics are the policies that now teachers have to list the books that are approved at so many different levels that they're being restricted and censored. That's politics. Teachers' time that they're being asked to do something, and they're looking to have people like me being censored out of the classroom. I say this every time. I really wonder how they're going to deal with the history book that says that I ran in 2022 for state senate. And so that's, we have to talk about all of that. We have to talk about minimum wage. We have to talk about all that. And those in conversations happening at the water cooler, at the fence line, at the door, in church, wherever we are, because Democrats are people of faith. Democrats are gun owners. Democrats care about our communities. Democrats care about, wanting to make sure that everybody has a fair shot, and that nobody's putting these obstacles in front of us, which is what the TNGOP seems to be doing, just intentionally putting obstacles in front of us, preventing us from being successful. So yeah, just these conversations that just having all the time. And I think that people a lot of times feel very frustrated at that uphill battle of what it seems of like, oh, this is just such a long shot. This is such a, he's been in office for so long, or this party is just so strong, or look at how much money that they've raised, or any of these things. He's more well known, she's more this, or whatever. How are you all addressing? I can tell. I'll at the end I'll talk about how I am, but how are you all addressing that hill?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say that, like again, and sort of reiterating some of the same themes here, we're doing it by focusing on things that apply to everyone, right? And I think that resonates with people. I mean, there really are not, red and blue issues when it comes to whether or not your child has access to a great education, or whether or not your community is going to be buoyed by a public school system that's going to create prosperity. It's not red or blue when you get a hospital bill that you can't pay, and that you're going to have to go have a medical bankruptcy. It's not red or blue when your relative has a heart attack and has to drive 100 miles to a hospital. That is a human issue, a Tennessean issue. And so, we talk about those issues, and then the hill doesn't seem so insurmountable. There are, issues that divide us, no doubt about it. Issues, no, I'm not going to see eye to eye on every single issue with anyone, probably, in the electorate. Everybody's got, blends of opinions. But the thing is if you look at the Venn diagrams, and I think there's so much more in common that we have. And that's the path forward. It's turning the volume down. It's caring about your neighbor. It's using data and common sense to take care of one another, and not letting people suffer because of political rhetoric and lack of leadership, which is what we're getting from Governor Bill Lee. We've got 27,000 fellow Tennesseans dead from COVID. We've got someone who has underfunded our public school system by 11,000 teacher positions, and didn't have the courage to stand up when they were called dumb by someone from outside. And we've got a guy who's waged a war on public education by trying to defund it with a voucher program. We've got a governor who knows that making being unhoused a felony is wrong. He said as much, but he didn't have the courage to veto that legislation, let it become true without law. We've got a governor who knows that it's wrong to pass the Truth in Sentencing Act, which makes it harder for folks to get out with certain convictions early. They're going to have to get 100% sentences served now. And he knew that was wrong, but he didn't have the courage to veto it and let it become law without a signature. So when you focus on what we have in common and how detrimental the lack of leadership is, the hill is not insurmountable.
I find at the door, when I'm talking to voters at the door or on the phone or any of that, what we tend to talk about is the process, not the solution we all want, because we all tend to want the same solution. We tend to argue about the process. And so when I have a lot of success being able to talk to voters about getting to that process. We all want this. We all want that. Your goal in this clearly is you want to keep your kids safe. Your goal in this is that you want a good quality education for your child. Your goal in this is that you want to be able to have a work-life balance. You want to know that you can come home to a roof over your head and a meal and have a life. That if something happened, if you had a heart attack or something, a car hits you or something, that you're not going to lose all of that because of medical bills. We all want that same thing. So how do we, so in that, let's work towards that goal and,
Right.
and do that and focus there versus this process.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. I think being solution oriented is really very poignant, Kate. Ben, we were in one county, and you said I was the third candidate you've been with that stood in front of this closed hospital. And so I think it's important to tell people, like, look, in 2018, Governor Bill Lee said that healthcare was a primary issue in the state of Tennessee, and nothing has really changed. That hospital is still closed. That community is still suffering. McNairy, that's right, McNairy County.
Yeah. I mean, up here we've got hospital downgrades. So there are, I think, something like 13 rural hospitals have closed statewide. And up here, it's downgrading hospitals. So we have a lot of glorified urgent cares and in this system. 80,000 people that live outside of the golden hour that's in the entire network just to get to a level 1 trauma center. That's a problem. In Johnson County, to get to a level 1 trauma center, it's an hour and 15 minutes. If you've got a heart attack, you're not, I mean, an hour and 15 minutes, that's a life. And then if you go out of network, out of state, out of network, it's 45 minutes. So that all of this is a problem if you're trying to get to a level 1 trauma center.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think too, Kate, when you're talking about letting go of partisanship and just meeting voters and speaking to them as a candidate rather than as a Democrat or as a Republican, a big piece of that is talking about kitchen table issues, as Dr. Martin calls it. But another piece of it is to, and I know you do this on your campaign because I've seen you do it, but when a voter tells you about an issue they have, draw that line and make that connection that that issue exists because of the supermajority the past 12 years in the Senate, the supermajority in the House in the past 12 years, and the governor. That issue doesn't exist just because it doesn't exist. And that doesn't matter if it's state, local, or national issue. You can still draw that line and help them see that their vote matters and who they vote for matters in addressing that issue. And I've seen that across the board, no matter if it's roads, trash, healthcare, reproductive rights, legalizing cannabis. I mean, that issue is just across the board.
Absolutely. I have a great example of that from yesterday when I was canvassing out in Carter County, and this gentleman who answers the door is talking to me, and I was asked if you're voting this November, and he said, absolutely. I said, what's driving you the most, getting you to the polls? Like, what is motivating you? And he said, my taxes keep going up. I'm really concerned. I'm on a fixed income and my taxes keep going up. And I said, I really hate that we have these billions of dollars stashed away in a rainy day fund that they won't spend. And at the end of this year, there's supposed to be another billion projected to be in this. Obviously, we need to have a rainy day fund, but it's pouring the rain here in the state and we're suffering. That our communities are suffering and we have to help it. We can't just keep stashing it away and taking that from all of us. And he said, I absolutely agree. And then so I went on and I said, they did the same thing with school funding. I said that they've talked about this and this bump in funding, which is really going to strip away to go to charter schools. And in essence, it's going to be our local communities that have to raise our property taxes to continue funding our public schools, and our taxes are going to continue to go up. And he said, that absolutely should not happen. I'm appalled at that. And he looked at me, straight at me, and said, you've got my vote. That is so wrong. I said, I'm so concerned about this, and I'm so glad that you're willing to fight for this.
Yeah, I mean, the love of that pile of money is really fundamental to what's wrong, I think, in government here in Tennessee. It's almost a form of idolatry that they really truly idolize that pile of money, and instead of being really proud of fully resourced public schools, being really proud of communities that have access to healthcare, they're proud of that pile of money, which belongs to us. It was taken from us. It's ours. It should be spent for the benefit of the community. No, I totally agree that we need to be careful with our spending. We need to be deliberate about it. We need to definitely have a rainy day fund. But what's going on now is really absurd for our communities. And there are a couple of other examples too of where the legislature is not focused on everyday working Tennesseans. I mean, let's take the hall tax, for example. Mm-hmm. The hall tax was basically an investment income tax that benefited that taxed the very highest end of Tennessee earners, mainly the top 15%. And it created about $300 million a year. And that tax was phased out. And that has had real consequences for working Tennesseans. So when that $300 million went away, the top 15% or so of Tennesseans got a tax break. But now communities are missing their share of the money, and they're having to raise property taxes. We were down in Cleveland, Tennessee, not too long ago, down in Bradley County. And we heard from citizens there about how they had to raise their property taxes to cover the $3 million deficit that the lack of the hall tax, imposed on that community. So it's a lack of putting priorities on working people. It's a lack of putting a priority on everyday folks instead of people who are making their money from investment income. That's part of the reason, why we're left with these financial holes. The TISA, which is the new funding formula for public education, is going to increase in absolute dollars for many districts around the state, the amount of money that comes from the state. But the part that we're not talking about that is very important is that each community's share of that increased dollar amount is going to go up in a few years. That will mean increases in property taxes across the state for many districts. And so that property tax bomb is yet to go off in the future. I think that funding public education, the state needs to have a bigger role in that, especially when we're sitting on the billions and billions of dollars in the rainy day fund.
Absolutely. And just adding the hall tax and all of the stuff. I mean, it was a lot for education that they stripped away. But on top of that, we're talking about infrastructure. We're talking about, broadband, yes, but also roads, water, and wastewater. I mean, there are pipes in John City that are 100 years old that really all we have funding is to just patch versus replace. That 30 to 35% of Johnson County residents don't have access to internet or broadband. That's a big deal. We've got roads with so many potholes in it. I mean, that's true all across the state, but that's a problem. So all of that, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
You're good.
Okay, cool. We say that we've got what we think is a recipe to grow economies across Tennessee, and it's education, healthcare, and infrastructure. Education is, of course, supporting our K-12 public schools, but also workforce development programs and vocational programs. Healthcare is expanding Medicaid. It's the quickest way to decrease the number of uninsured people in Tennessee by half overnight. And the third part of that is what you just mentioned, and it's infrastructure, which, every community's got a road or a bridge or a water system that is important to them. But broadband is really the tie that binds when it comes to infrastructure needs across the state. We're 34th in the nation when it comes to broadband implementation, and it needs to be a priority because it's more than Facebook and YouTube, and as Lily says, TikTok. And my oldest daughter, she said, and don't forget TikTok. But it truly is a utility for businesses that want to come to town, and so we've got to make that a priority. And it's information for voter engagement. It's access to telehealth and telemental health. It absolutely needs to happen.
Yeah. So I want to shift it kind of back to voter turnout and strategies for turning, because we've talked a lot about issues and like what's created this urgency for us and why we ran, why we stepped up, why we're out talking to voters, why this matters. And I think that there's a lot of election fatigue. There's a lot of political fatigue. Goodness knows that every single time our phone buzzes, we're like, what just happened? What other mass shooting just happened? Gosh, even the news from this morning about the shooting at the White House and all of that. I mean, it's just stacked on stacked on stacked on stacked on stacked. And there's emotional and mental fatigue. And then if you layer that in with the fact that this has been going on, it's been going on longer than this, but intensely since 2016. And so a lot of people got engaged after the 2016 election, worked, got Biden elected, and now they're fatigued and said, I need a breath. So how is your campaign approaching those volunteers, those organizers who are engaged in their community, but exhausted? What message would you have for them?
I'll go first and then let Ben back clean up here. I think, one, thank you to all of those volunteers and thank you to all of those organizers and thank you to everyone that has worked tirelessly since 2016. You're exhaustion and your burnout is valid, and it's deserved, quite honestly. I think we as Democrats, we as campaigns, and we as candidates have to think about how we're building infrastructure that outlast our candidacy and our campaign. And so, we cannot keep relying on the same organizers this cycle that we've been relying on for the past 6 years. Re-engage them, energize them, bring them into our campaign, and then work with them to help train and bring up the next level of organizers that are going to blaze this path forward. I mean, one, we have to do it from a sustainability standpoint, but two, we just have to do it from a numbers game. I mean, that's what elections are. It's numbers game. You've got to get more voters and more organizers out than your opponent. And so I think it's super critical that the people that have been doing the work, we work with them to identify other people that can do the work and have them train and work alongside them and support them. Ben, going to pass it to you now.
Yeah, and I've been really proud so far of the internship program that we've ran here. There's been a lot of really great first-time young people that have never been involved in politics that have gotten on our campaign and done a really great job with voter contact, with outreach. And it's actually really invigorating to candidates and staff when you see someone who comes in who hasn't been involved before and they're like, what else can I do? I'm not accepting that this is the way things are, and that Tennessee is a red state. Like, they're just not accepting that. And by involving people like young people in internships and volunteers who have never done this before, I feel like we can definitely invigorate both volunteers and voters, because we all remember how we felt the night after the past president won in 2016, and we can't go back to that and just be complacent because there's a Democratic president, because the work that's happening at the state legislature is so important. So we have to involve people who haven't been involved before so that they can get us energized and ready to go for the future.
Yeah. And just to add in, this election cycle, like when we talk about urgency, it's election commissions. And so when we think about what's setting up for the 2024 presidential run and how we're going to make sure that it stays a fair and accessible election, that we've got to protect our election commissions. And that starts at the state level and bleeds down into the local level, but that starts at the state level. And so if we don't elect Dr. Martin, if we don't elect myself, if we don't elect the other Democrats that are running across the state that believe in this, then we put our elections at risk. Our Secretary of State signed on to the lawsuit, saying that it wasn't a fair election, that the votes that came in should not have been counted. Like, that was, he signed on to the Texas lawsuit. So this is what's at stake. And so if you're going to have a message, and I think we'll go completely around the box of urgency coming into this, because there is just as much of an urgency as there was in 2020, as there is in 2022, as there will be in 2024. What is your message around urgency to the volunteers and to the voters?
Yeah, this election cycle is crucial. It's absolutely crucial. I mean, right now, I think that the pendulum has swung so far to one side that we have to get back to a more tenable place. And I think about this in terms of issues. About how radical our current administration is on guns, on women's health rights, on public education, and on all of those issues, our communities are harmed. And so I feel like it's absolutely crucial that every voice be heard this election cycle. And I want people to feel empowered to know that they can make a difference. They absolutely can make a difference. We can speak, with one voice, and win this election. And I will be completely transparent with you. When I started this a year and a half ago, I don't know that I believed that the race could be won. I thought it was very important work. I thought it was very important that we build something. But But I'm telling you, after visiting every corner of this state, after meeting people where they are, after hearing about their pinch points, they don't care about partisan identity when it comes to a lot of these kitchen table issues. They want someone who's going to speak for them, who's going to take care of their communities rather than trying to line their buddies' pockets. And so I think that it's that kind of message that is creating urgency in voters and is going to bring people out to the polls. And I think that, Kate, we're going to win these things.
Yeah. Emily?
Yeah, I just, there was so much at stake in 2016. There was so much at stake in 2020. There is just so much at stake in 2022. I think if you look back historically, a lot of voters don't necessarily realize this, but for the longest time, Democrats held the supermajority in the state house, in the state senate, and in the governor's mansion. We had a trifecta. We were the Democrats from the state. And in the past 12 years, since the redraw, since we became a superminority in the Senate and in the House, and since we have not had a Democratic governor, we have seen, we've come last in the nation for our public schools, or nearly last in the nation for our public schools. We're having a public health crisis. Dozens of hospitals have closed. And now we're seeing our civil liberties and our constitutional rights ripped out from under us. We have taken away what children can read in schools. We're monitoring what books are on our shelves and what literacy and literature and media is consumed in our state. We've taken away a woman's right to choose. And we've taken away public safety, and we've taken away the need for permits on carrying guns in public places. There's so much at stake this election cycle, and I think we just have to reiterate and re-drive that point home as much as possible and remind them that there has been a different way and there can be a better way.
Ben?
The other thing to remind folks is that on the issues, we win 9 times out of 10. The referendum that recently passed in Kansas, the New York Times took that same number and they extrapolated with Kansas's partisanship score. If that same vote were held in every state in the country, Tennessee would codify the right to choose into our state laws. This is possible right now, not in 5 years, not in 10 years. So as long as we can talk about our issues and push back against any narratives that are written about us, we can win. And we have a lot of really great chances this year, not only at the gubernatorial level, not only at the state legislative level, but also on the congressional level. There is a lot of opportunity there that if we talk our issues and we don't let them define us, we define ourselves and we define how much we care about the citizens of Tennessee, then we're going to be fine. And just don't let anybody define who we are, because we can win on our issues right now.
I'd like to add one more point too. I mean, another way we win is by raising money. And so I would ask for people, who are listening tonight to understand that mail costs money, staff costs money, obviously gas costs money to crisscross the state. I mean, everything that we do to get our word out costs money, and it has to be a shared sacrifice to be successful. I mean, granted, Governor Lee has raised over $4 million so far. He's going to need every one of those dollars to run away from his record. But for us to be effective, and Kate, for you to be effective with a counterpoint, we also have to have resources as well. And I think that just how we were talking about, some people in Tennessee feel like their vote doesn't matter because it seems like an overwhelming task ahead. I think people in the donor community also sometimes feel like, well, it doesn't matter, and so I'm not going to give to this race or that race. I may give to a national race out of state because I feel like my dollars will have more impact there. That is false. That is a false narrative. We need to keep our resources in the state of Tennessee. We need to do like Georgia did and invest in victory over the course of years. And that's how we ultimately flip this state. And so I would talk and implore the people in the donor community who are sitting on the sidelines right now, perhaps get involved. Help us out. Help us get the word out so that we can be successful. To the thousands of small dollar donors who have contributed to our campaign, thank you so much. Every single contribution has been valuable to us and helpful to us and meaningful to us. I mean, I look at the list of people who contributed, and it's overwhelming to me, the responsibility that we feel to do the right thing and to you know and to try to make this run as effective as possible. And I'm sure you feel the same way.
I absolutely do. Thank you for that, Dr. Martin. So yeah, the donate link is scrolling down at the bottom, both his and mine. So please go on and donate. Every amount matters. So please go on and donate. We need that, as he mentioned, for mailers, even sending a text message costs money. And so all of it, even this platform to stream this, costs money. And we want to do it. We want to connect with you, and we want to come knock on your door. That door hanger, that piece of literature that we have costs money. To register to be at the county fair costs money. So please help us go talk to voters by using that donate link. I'm going to share why this is so urgent for me. I grew up in this community. This has been my home for so long. And I love it. And I've always said that when you're coming down 81 and you see the mountains, it just feels like they're hugging you. There is something about these mountains here that is just magical to me. And I think that a lot of people here feel the same way too, when they look around and see our beautiful scenery, see a community that genuinely cares about each other, that when someone's injured, we'll go roll up the trash can for them. We show up with a casserole. That we ask when a friend of mine's house burned down just this last week, we show up. What do you need? What can we do? You need clothes? Do you need a place to stay? Can we house a dog? What can we do to help? This is the community that we are. And this is the community we are statewide. We saw this with the Gatlinburg fires. We all, even in this community, showed up to help those in Gatlinburg. It's just who we are. And I think that the Republicans like to give a narrative that divides us. And I know even me saying pointing the finger at the Republicans of the Tennessee GOP, it sounds divisive. And you know what? That's exactly what they've done. And so I want to keep our community intact. I think that we all deserve a place, a fair shot. And so I want us all to get to Nashville to do that, to start removing the barriers that have been placed in front of us intentionally that prevent us from being successful. Because even despite the best put efforts, that we were going to still struggle, and they know it and they're fine with it. So let's help make Tennessee better. Let's help make District 3 better. Let's help make our communities stronger by electing Democrats, by electing both Dr. Martin and myself this November. So I want to thank our guests for being here today. So everybody, join me in the comments, or likes, hearts, shares, or donating. Signing up to volunteer is also great. But Dr. Martin, his campaign manager, Emily Cupples, and to Ben Jones, his deputy campaign manager. So thank you all so much for being here. Voter turnout is the key to winning. And so please sign up to volunteer, because we've got to go talk to voters. And I want to echo what Emily, Dr. Martin, and Ben have all said. Thank you to all the volunteers who continue to work week in and week out for all of our campaigns. You are making a difference, and never feel like you're doing anything less than that. You're making a difference. And speaking of volunteering, I want to share that I've got some events coming up. So we've got the Emancipation Day this Saturday, and these are all going to happen in about a 2-week period. So Emancipation Day this Saturday, it was rescheduled due to weather, so need people to help table. The Appalachian Fair kicks off August 22nd and will run through the 22nd. Need volunteers to help us table, help talk to voters out there in Gray. Tri-Pride is August 27th. If you've never been in the parade or helped table at Tri-Pride, please come. I've got wonderful rainbow shirts to help. And so we'll be out there on August 27th. And then I'm really excited to announce that we've got a Labor Day rally happening on Labor Day. So we're going to do a rally to talk about Amendment 1. We're going to do a rally to talk about workers' rights. We're going to do a rally to talk about what the difference that this common sense would make in Nashville. And then we're going to, from the rally in Carver Park, we're going to go canvass. We're going to go talk to voters. We're going to pair people up. We're going to get people ready. So please don't be intimidated. We'll have a packet and people ready to go with you. Even if it's your first time, I promise it's going to be fun. And so that is going to be at Carver starting at 10 a.m. on Monday, September 5th. So you can go sign up for these events at katecraigtn.com/events, and would love to have you. But yes, so thank you to everyone for tuning in, and please go to Dr. Martin's website. I'm sure he's got events posted there. If there's any plugs they'd like to give, I want to let them plug it.
I just want to say thanks for the opportunity to share time with you today, Kate. I know you're working really hard, and you got a great message, and we're going to make it happen up in Northeast Tennessee. And Ben is on the calendar, so if you want to plug any events, Ben, I'll let you.
Yeah, the big thing, continue checking out our website, martinfortn.com, donate there. We are going to be at the 3-star dinner that the state party is putting on in 2 weekends from now. But otherwise, keep an eye on our social medias and our website, and we'll let y'all know about future events coming up. We have a lot coming up, so thank y'all.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And we'll see you next time, next Sunday. I'm excited to share that Dr. Michelle Fiscus will be with us to talk about how expanding Medicaid will positively impact the state as well as District 3. So we'll see you next Sunday at 6 o'clock. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.